Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. This session is all about reading and note-taking. Now, we've run sessions on these as separate ideas in the past, but decided that actually there's a time and a place to combine them because actually note-taking can help with your reading and vice versa. So I'm joined by Suzanne Newcombe in the studio. Now, when she's not here, Suzanne is a lecturer in religious studies and she's chair of A322, Why is Religion Controversial? Not a subject we're going to discuss today, hopefully, Suzanne, because we only have half an hour. So I wonder if we can start off by giving our students at home a task, I think, because they've been asking whether they should be taking notes during this, and we've told them not to, but I think now is the time when we should maybe ask them to take some notes.
Absolutely. It won't be hard.
OK, so we have a task for you. We'd like you to take some notes on what I'm going to show you next, and Kath and Beth are on our hot desk and they're going to feed back some of your notes. So in the chat, if you could just let us know what you think about this particular thing, and they're watching with eager eyes to see what you have to say.
Very, very cute seems to be the overall consensus.
Oh. Right. So this is my dog, who I'm missing, and he's not allowed in the studio because she wants a big fuss every time someone new comes in. So, Suzanne, why have we given this task to students to take notes?
Well, one of the most important things about taking notes is to really think about what you're seeing or what you're thinking about or what you're digesting. And there's no wrong answer to what you're taking notes about, but there's some answers that might be better depending on what you're looking for. So if you were looking about what people do on holiday, this picture might tell you one thing. If you're looking about breeds of dogs, this picture might tell you another. Or if you're looking for artistic composition, there's a very striking angular diagonal composition of the picture. So what you want to take notes on really depends on what you're looking for.
So, Kath and Beth, what have people said at home?
We've got Mario saying I've been taking notes.
Sorry,
Sharon saying I haven't taken notes. So it seems to be a case of that's a little bit. Oh, and Claire says your dog looks just like her dog.
Oh.
But yeah, wet black dog, sunny day, landscape, green and mountainous.
So people are picking up different things from that same photograph.
Absolutely, and that's completely normal, and that's what you have to start with. Whatever subject you're studying, you've got to start with what you see, what your reactions are, what you find interesting, and then to think about how this engages with the subject you're trying to learn. So is it about landscapes? Is it about artistic composition? Is it about dogs or cute things?
Now, that's one task. The other task we'd like you to do is fill in our interactive tools. We'd like to know where you do your best thinking when you're studying your OU course, and if you're a new student, where you think you might do your best thinking. Now, on some of these, where there are 3 boxes, you need to put 3 things, and if you can't think of 3, that's fine, but you need a full stop or something in those other boxes, otherwise your results won't submit. And we'd also like to know where do you concentrate best when you're reading? Why do you take notes? That's a multi-choice question, so click on the one option that applies to you. And will you try something different this year with your reading and note-taking? OK, so as you say, there's a diverse range of answers here, and you've made the point that it's about being active, but very often within OU materials you don't get a nice picture of a dog, which is an error in my opinion. But often there are lots of words and graphs and statistics and various other things that students are going to meet. And as Matt said before, sometimes it's the author of the chapter saying something and teaching, interspersed with something from Marx that's very short and a sort of secondary source. So how do students go about doing this active reading and recognising these voices?
Well, absolutely. Well, the first thing is to think about how you're reading and why you're reading. So there's different styles of reading. Some are better for skimming and just getting an overview, and then there's times when you want to read really in-depth and kind of deconstruct the argument. What is the process being described in a scientific subject, or how is the argument being structured in a more humanities or social science-based argument? So in your first reading, sometimes if I'm finding material really difficult, particularly as an undergraduate, I just kind of underlined key points to try to follow the reading and stay awake even.
Yeah.
It was a really hard one. But then rereading it, you make really effective use of highlighters or notes in the margins to kind of say, this is the key thesis statement, this is point one of the argument, this is the evidence for that. And it's a way of dialoguing with the text, of having a conversation with the text. So reading and note-taking really work together to actively have a conversation with the material. It's kind of like you're not sitting at home reading, you're tapping into the author of the course material, you're tapping into all the history, all the little quotes that they're drawing on. So it's just kind of a start of a learning dialogue.
So sometimes it's useful to both record what you're reading and sort of make a note of that so that you know whether you need to come back to it at some point or to sort of, I guess, track what you do. Some students can highlight and they won't take any notes at all, and you've mentioned annotating also. How might students who are new to this sort of figure out when they should be doing what?
Well, what you don't want to do is take huge chunks of text verbatim, because that really, you might as well just go back to the course book for that. But what is good is if you look at the assessment or what the learning outcomes of your particular, whatever your reading might be. So if you're working towards an exam, what are the topics likely to come up on the exam? If you're working towards an essay, what are the themes or key points that you're likely to draw out on the essay? So look at the goal of what you're reading as you, maybe not the first reading, but certainly the second reading when you go back and take notes. Have a specific idea in mind. This is the topic that's likely to come up in the assessment strategy.
So it's having a clear purpose. So it's something we've spoken about a lot today in terms of why you might be taking notes, for example. Now, tell me this then, Suzanne. Sometimes in the module material, there might be a ream of text about something, explaining a concept or something, and it's really, really long. And then there might be a really short theory or idea or concept that's very small. And sometimes students can struggle with that ratio, I guess, of what they take notes on and what they don't. Sometimes you can read something and you can say that in a sentence. And sometimes I need to write more than what's there to sort of try and capture what the meaning of that thing is within the context of which I'm reading it.
Absolutely. And I think a really good strategy is to think about note-taking creatively. And you might want to do diagrams, because sometimes you can draw out what's meant in a whole, that takes like maybe 2 pages to write out longhand. So we've got a few diagrams here to show you the various ways this might happen. This is a diagram of a cycle that might be found in...
I'll show that here so you can point at it.
Might be found in biology, which describes a whole process that you might take a whole chapter to unpack in words. But once you get it in your head, you could draw it as a picture. And then on the other side, there's more of a mind map, which might be a really good way of consolidating your thoughts both as you're reading and after you're reading. So you can take notes after you've read in preparation for writing an essay or revision for an exam.
Mind maps are a really hot topic. People are sharing ideas about that in the chat.
Absolutely. You can do them longhand, which is actually my favourite way of doing it. I like to go to a cafe and write out things with different coloured pens, because I find my mind works best that way. But you can also do them on computer, and I think this is becoming more and more popular way of doing it. And for people who are really comfortable with digital technology, this can be a great way of planning your essays and sorting out what you actually remember from your reading. And
there are lots of free tools you can download and use.
Absolutely, and there's some on the Skills for Study website, some suggestions for different ways of approaching mind mapping and different note-taking. And there's another kind of Venn diagram that might be a good way to think
I'm big into Venn diagrams. I love them, because sometimes something's really, really important and very small, and sometimes it's really big and not very important at all.
Absolutely.
And I love the idea of where things overlap, because very often I think what we ask students to do is say, here's an idea and here's another idea, and compare and contrast, or where's the similarity and difference. So some things like this can help you physically put things into categories.
Absolutely. I mean, another thing that I've done a lot is making 2 columns of notes.
Gosh, you have a lot of notes.
I brought some of my notes from when I was doing undergraduate study, and let me just, I thought I had it pulled out, but I did lots of columns.
You find those. I'm going to take a trip and see how everyone is at home, because I hope that people are sharing some various ideas about mind mapping tools and whether or not you like to do them online or on an old scrap piece of paper.
We have a lot of people very excited about mind mapping.
Yes.
Very excited.
Is it better than bullet journals, though? Because that was the topic earlier.
I think mind maps are working well with students, and colour coding. And general consensus of students is just trying it out and finding out what works best for them with their studies.
And a lot of positive feedback about your dog still.
Yeah.
Oh, good. and I hear Helen's having a really bad day, which I'm sorry about, Helen. So stay on the sofa and stay with us, and it's okay not to have a good day. In fact, our next session is about staying well and studying well, so our guests might have some advice for you then. But I'm sorry to hear you're not feeling so good.
So just a few more examples. This is from my undergraduate study, but I've done kind of bullet points of the key points of various readers, and then I've got, I was thinking about what's the difference between mass media, old forms of mass media like television and radio versus the internet, and so I had kind of 2 columns separating out different ideas of each different kind of media. So that's kind of how I structured my thinking at one point.
I love that. You're structuring your thinking, because what you're doing is you're both recording something, but actually the whole process of the note-taking is helping you to categorise. And it's that way of deconstructing what's in the book that is learning.
Absolutely. It's not like you want to read and then be able to regurgitate it verbatim. It's about how you understand it and a dialogue. And your tutors will want to see your understanding. They don't want you to just regurgitate the textbook.
They don't want a photograph of what you've...
Absolutely
well,
not.
I think photographs have their time and place, but perhaps not for note-taking.
Absolutely. So mark up your books. This is a really good example of kind of underlining key points, marking in the margins.
Because these books are for people to keep forever.
Absolutely.
On their bookshelf. So your books are things you can do with whatever you want. You can highlight, you can do whatever. And
it's really interesting when you come back to revising, or even years. I've kept my books for years and come back to them and think, oh yeah, I remember what I was thinking. I remember what cafe I was in, or what things
lots of
smelled
cafes
like.
for you, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And what's this one? This is a flow diagram.
That's right, yes. So some processes or trains of events might be better illustrated by a flow diagram. So just keep your mind open to what's the best way to think about this, and it might not be writing reams of sentences or highlighting your whole book.
So it's about purpose. It's about saying, what am I trying to record by these notes? Am I trying to capture a process and see how component parts fit together? Am I trying to overlap things? Am I trying to separate the areas of a very big complex thing with a mind map? Am I trying to compare and contrast things side by side? Having that sense of purpose before you actually start taking the notes. So you spoke about some of the reading techniques, and you mentioned skim reading, and there are various sorts of reading techniques that students can learn about more. Is it important then to sort of have a vague sense of what the notes might be before you start taking them? Or do you ever use notes, like you said earlier, when you really don't understand something, and I do this as well, sometimes I think I have to just find a way to pick through this because I don't understand what they're trying to say. What's important then?
Absolutely. I mean, I think when you don't understand what you're reading, trying to figure out what is the main point, what seems to be the conclusion, what is the author trying to get across here is the most important thing. And it's absolutely fine. In fact, it's probably essential to take notes when you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, which happens a lot more than people think it would.
Absolutely. And,
yes.
and all of us lecturers here at the university have had that experience when we were studying.
Yeah.
I can guarantee it.
And it's probably in some of our writing. But yeah, so highlighting, I guess, has its time and place when you're really trying to see what is the point, and also taking notes to scaffold that. But also sometimes if you're trying to record something, maybe for an assignment or an exam.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think moving the subject on a little bit, I think one of the biggest challenges in the modern age is the different ways you can record things. And I know there's a tendency for me to take pictures of things, like if I have to go to a library and I'm only going to see this source, I take loads of pictures. And there's different ways of cataloging that, like some people use app software like OneNote, or there's a few different versions of that. But that can be a really important way of just remembering things if you see something on social media that you want to come back to, a news item. So there's a whole new set of tools for extending your questioning of the world, your interrogation of the world, and how that relates to your studies, and that might feed back into your learning.
Yeah, and this is an important point as well about the photographs, because I assume you're referring to various sources and things as opposed to perhaps books that you're taking photographs of. So you might be seeing the world around you and be mindful of different media. But sometimes you might need to have something verbatim or captured as it is, like a photograph, and sometimes you might not. So some things like definitions, for example, equations, etc. There's some stuff that you just can't get away from structuring beautifully like this.
Absolutely, and I started off taking notes on old-fashioned note cards like you had in filing.
A few years ago, yes.
I'm older than I look. But some notes you want to take just as like memorization tools. So it might be like a flashcard if you're coming up for an exam, or you might have quotes that you can use in your essay to structure different paragraphs, and so you might want to record those verbatim quotes as an element of an argument you're building.
Okay, now we asked people earlier about where they concentrate best when they're reading, and we'll take a look at what they said. So if you haven't let us know your answers to those questions, please do, because I'd love to see where you do your best thinking and where you concentrate best when reading. We spoke earlier, Suzanne, about study spaces and about this idea that they could be anywhere, and that actually a lot of it was a mindset, irrespective, and that it might be worth having your own parameters, whatever they are, and also having a purpose for that study. So, can you tell us about where is best to read and note take?
I don't think there is any one right answer, and I think it's really important that people understand that they've got to work with whatever situation they have. But also you need to pay attention to where you are able to concentrate the best. So some people need silence and finding a local library. There's lots of local public libraries, or some people have the luxury of having a quiet room in their house, which is absolutely fantastic. But other times we need to find little spaces to study and concentrate where we can. So it might be on the train. It might be, for instance, where my daughter's taking a gymnastics class. I might have an hour to take notes on something.
Well, let's see where our audience said they do their best thinking. So we've got a range of options here. In the bath, yep, on the sofa, walking the dog, yeah, before bed, bedroom, at my desk, staff room, the toilet, yeah, a very important place. In the bath, reading, watching TV, train journeys, when comfy, during the afternoon, with a pen online, lunch break, gardening, in my armchair. Many, many different things. And I think what's really important is that we've asked where, and some of those are things that aren't located to a particular place. They're an activity like walking or doing something. Some are in specific places, and some are more feelings or ways of being in the world. So when comfortable, etc.
Absolutely. So some of the note-taking you need to do is about capturing your thoughts when you're in those spaces. So it can be handy to have like a piece of paper next to your bed in case you have a wonderful thought just before you're going to sleep and you don't want to get up. Walking the dog. I also have a dog who I love, and I find that sometimes I take notes by turning record on my phone and pretending I'm talking to someone while I map out what I don't want to forget before I get home to write. So I think you have to be creative about thinking about where can you plan your next essay. Maybe it's on your commute, maybe it's as you're walking the dog, and find a way to record those notes. So that's another really important way of thinking about reading and note-taking.
Because it is hard for students, and I can see why some students might paraphrase things when they're sitting taking notes right next to their book, often with this idea that there should be a ratio between what they're reading and what they're taking notes on, and then what relates to the assignment or the TMA. But this idea of thinking is sort of taking a step away from that material and being able to deconstruct it and think about the meaning it has. It's an important part of the process.
Absolutely. And a good way to check what you understand might be to read the paragraph and then shut the book and try to write out what you remember of the paragraph. And that might reveal, or whatever concept you're trying to learn, that might reveal what the gaps were. You read it and you thought you understood it, but there's something missing, and then you can go back and look for it.
I often walk the dog and think, right, what was I reading? And I try and remember it, and often I can't. And I sense check, and then I think, why can't I remember what it was? And then I'll just I'll keep walking. And then some of it will come back to me, actually, as I sort of mull over in my head. But I find that a really good way of actually sort of being able to take a step back from what I've been reading and think about the key points.
Absolutely. And I think learning how your mind works, so that there's spaces when you're relaxed, sometimes you just need a bit more time, and you'll understand something, or it'll sink in. So giving yourself space to read and remember and digest and understand. I mean, you have to be patient.
And it's interesting where those gaps are, because sometimes I think, oh, that took me ages to read. Why can I only remember one or two things? And I'll often go back and compare it, and maybe those things were important and I haven't understood, or they weren't important and they just took up a lot of space, perhaps explaining how something was done, or something I didn't really need to remember because it wasn't really relevant.
Or you read because you have one question in your head, but then later you realise whatever you're reading was important for a different question, and you have to reread it and think about it in a different way.
Which is why it's a good idea to always understand what your TMA questions are all about. So we also asked where people concentrate best when they're reading. Let's see what you have to say.
So many armchairs. So many armchairs.
So many armchairs.
Armchairs, sofas, Just anywhere they can have 5 minutes of peace and quiet.
Beds were quite a popular place to study. Definitely, yeah.
Definitely. Some of them saying they're waiting for their comb-bound books so they can properly just relax and chill.
Oh, yeah.
Have everything laid out the way they want.
And coffee shops, is that you, Suzanne?
That's definitely.
It does sound a bit like you, or else someone's got good ideas from you.
But I was gratified to read a psychological study that was suggesting that if you have a change of scene with a specific purpose, it can really help your concentration. So if you say, I'm going to move to this place and do this bit of work, that can help you focus your mind. It doesn't have to be a coffee shop. I just happen to like them. It might be your bed.
Yeah.
But going somewhere for a specific period of time and a specific purpose can help focus your attention on whatever you're reading or note-taking.
And particularly because coffee shops get quite miffed when you do window washing and recategorising all their teaspoon drawers, etc. So sometimes it's nice to be able to get a break so that you don't procrastinate and you think, right, this is my purpose, that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go home after that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, you had another really good idea about recording thoughts, and you've mentioned some of them, like, you know, on your phone, etc. But you've also got this scrapbook idea, which I love. Can you tell our students at home how you use your scrapbook to collate ideas and capture things together?
Well, the idea of a scrapbook is kind of the old-fashioned one where you write out kind of headings, you might stick photographs, you might have bullet points, and quotes that are memorable. But I tend to carry around just a blank book, of hardbound blank book where I can jot in whatever I'm thinking about and how it might relate to all the various activities I'm doing. Other people do this online or through a variety of apps, and they find that a more natural means. And some of the courses have kind of an online blog where you can tag things, so you can go back and search for keywords, which can be a very good way of using digital material. But not to think about notes as one medium. They might be audio, they might be visual, they might be diagrams, they might be in your book. So it's more the concept of a scrapbook rather than having an actual stationary book that you're carrying around with you. Although that could be helpful too.
All the printers are on fast action, as people are finding out they can print all their material and go and read them and highlight them. I went through a phase of using OneNote, actually, because what I realised was a lot of stuff I was looking at was on Facebook, you know, TED Talks and various news articles, and I wanted to collate stuff. And for me, you know, having paper was actually a little bit prohibitive because I was working in quite a multimedia way. So can you have scrapbooks online, and how might they work?
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a whole variety of ways they might work. I might just use a folder in like my documents that says stuff relating to this module or this assignment relating to this module, and download websites or screenshots and stick them all in that folder. But apps work just as well, or you might have other ways of bookmarking or saving in your favourite ways of looking at online media.
It's this whole idea again of why you're taking notes and what the purposes of them. Are they recording something? How are you going to use them, etc. And finding a way that works for you.
And finding a way to find them again.
Yeah. Oh, that's really important, isn't it? And this is the problem with some post-it notes, is that they lose their glue and then you can't find them anymore. So yeah, but there are different things. Have you found then that as you've well, do you do different things each year? Is there a thing, like I've just been through my OneNote phase and, you know, now I'm into a different sort of phase, and, you know, do you change in terms of how you capture your observations about the world?
Absolutely. I've kind of been through times of where almost everything was longhand, and then I've had times when I was very carefully organising things into folders, and my folders are getting a bit messy at the moment. And I'm thinking about trying some apps and trying some of the new online tools, because I am taking a lot of photographs of sources and documents, and I'd like to be able to organise them better.
Because sometimes it is that payoff, isn't it? You think, well, this is going to take me time to understand how it works, but if it pays off, like if I could find all my things, or if I could access the multimedia material, it might work now. And that fluidity in trying something new seems to be a really important message.
Absolutely, but there's some kind of balance to be had of spending a lot of time trying to master a new medium and just pen and paper, you know how to write, and actually you can do most of what you need that way.
Yeah, like I found out last night with the library. Okay, so we asked people at home, will you try and find something new to do with your reading and note-taking this year? Let's see what you had to say. 40% says unsure, 50% said yes and 3% said no. It's important, if what's working for you is working for you, that's good, but it's good to try new things. And as we both say, we both evolve in terms of how we do things. And there's new technology, new pens, new stationery. There's lots of new stuff on the market to play with all the time.
Absolutely, and you might find you have to take a different approach because something else changes in your
Yes.
life.
Yes.
If you have a child, if something in your family life changes, you might need to find new spaces and new times to do your study, which is something we've all been through as well.
Perfect. I think we've covered pretty much everything here in terms of what you want to cover. Was there anything that we've missed, Suzanne?
I think we've done a pretty good, quick run through of a variety of things to think about. And there's the Skills for Study online if you want to think about it further, which is very well structured. Absolutely.
We have the links to that on the resources page of the Student Hub Live website, so you can go and take a look at those. There's some wonderful assets, Study at the OU, at the Help Centre, where you can download PDF booklets, and there's also a range of interactive online activities. So if you're interested in trying different techniques, they cover all of them systematically. So how to skim and scan, various techniques that you can use with your reading and note-taking. So do take a look for those. That's a great way to start thinking about what might work for you in your study. So instead, as Matt said, of ploughing ahead and getting your first TMA done way ahead of schedule, it may be worth spending some time really thinking about the various techniques on offer and picking a couple that might work for you that you can try this term. Right, our next video is the Jenny Lee tour, and then we're going to give you our Freshers trailer, because next week is Freshers and we'll be covering all sorts of things that are very important to know for OU students next week. But Suzanne, thank you so much for coming along.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you again soon.
Fantastic.
Right, enjoy the video break, and then we'll be back with Stay Well, Study Well with Emma and Michelle. I'll see you then.